Haley, it is so good to see you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Last I saw you, we were in New York. I was hanging out with you, Jeff Bland, a few other dignitaries, talking about all kinds of things, functional medicine. And I was excited about my new series that was coming out on homesickness, and your new book was coming out on detoxification. And so we've been running around the same circles for a minute. And it's kind of a weird place, I got to say, because how do I say this? It's hard because a lot of people don't want to hear this shit. It's like, la, 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 the world's toxic. I know the sun's bad for me. The water's everywhere, and it's like, yes, but at the same time, you're buying ice plunge and a sauna and you're on hormone replacement therapy and you just don't feel well. And you don't realize that it could possibly be because of all the toxins. And if you just remove the toxins, you'd feel better. So I take my hat off to you before you even start, because this is a difficult subject. The world's toxic and it's hard to tell people because everyone's already telling them and they've tuned it out in some ways.
For sure. And you're sitting here, even though, we're recording video between you and I have colored blonde hair. I'm about to go to a lacrosse field and watch my kids run around for the 6th time this week on toxic turf. So everything I am talking about is really about living in the real world, but understanding that this is a really important tool in keeping us healthy, or even to managing current diseases like rheumatologic conditions, inflammation or, metabolic issues. The point is, this is not a slam dunk. This is really about understanding the connection about how chemicals affect health. These synthetic chemicals that have only been around in our existence for the past 75 years, we have over 95,000 estimated, and how we have so much robust data on what they do at the cellular level, at the organ level, and how we feel clinically different. And it's really about changing the destiny of your health when you understand that this is a key part of, being well, to be honest. And that's really what I'm trying to share, not to scare people, but to empower them.
Yeah. And you have the right tone in it, right? Like the doom and gloom doesn't work. The challenge obviously is you have the people who are like, oh my God, you're right. And then you have all the neighbors who are spraying with glyphosate and, doing everything as if nothing's changed. And you're like, oh my God, you're exposing my child to your stuff. And so as a mom and as a human living on planet Earth, let's talk about an operating system of, not being judgy and not getting angry and just trying to flow through our city lives.
This is not an area where anyone should be judging because there's no perfection here. It's really about 80-20 in my estimate, is doing as much as we can within the situations we've created. We've created air pollution. We've created contaminated drinking water because our systems are really not set up for the modern day level of chemicals that are getting into our waterways. We've set up our processed foods and we have it everywhere, and it's convenient and it's cheap. So there's no judgment. It's really, honestly, it's about teaching people what that connection is and really kind of doing it in a way that is empowering. It's not even a competition. It's not even a shame game or about regret. There's plenty of people listening who have either themselves illness or have, maybe they're managing remission and they've had cancer and they want to stay clean and healthy. And that was the jarring moment in their life. Maybe they have a kid with disability. I mean, my feeling is that no matter where you are on the spectrum of health or illness, you have an opportunity to intervene with reasonable, practical changes that lower your exposures to chemicals we know are harmful and essentially lower your risk for either developing illnesses, which I see every day, of course, as a rheumatologist, but also even to keep your body healthy and well when you don't have an active disease or you don't feel things or you want to prevent issues or you want to manage inflammation. So no matter where you are, there's a role for this. Even I talk about patient cases, one patient with chronic fatigue and how I worked that up as an integrative doctor with rheumatology background. Like, I really want people to understand there's lots of things you may feel. This is one tool, not just sauna. And I talk about in the book sweating. Nutrition is in this book in terms of how it helps nutrition, in terms of our cellular health and anthropology. But we really want to be thinking about the products we buy and what we put on our skin, what we bring into our homes. All of that we have control over.
What's interesting is we have to control over that more often than we think, because that stuff runs out. And then we run out to the store and buy it again and again and
Mhm.
again. And so to me, that's a really easy opportunity to start making healthy swaps on the renewable stuff, shampoos and soaps and laundry. And so there's so many areas. Let's start the areas of our lives where we are getting this exposure and some of the areas of our lives where we can make easy changes to get less of the exposure.
You started off with one of the key points is, and it's part of some of the paradigm I set up, which is called the 4 A's of environmental health navigation. And it's very simple, actually. It's number one is assess. We want to assess what we're exposed to so we know where we're beginning on this journey. So there's a 50-question survey that's very reasonable in the book to start out to kind of get an idea of where chemicals come from and where those sources are so we can either cut them off or do something about it or buy less products. So assess is number one for the 4 A's. Number two is avoid or swap, which you just talked about. You can avoid chemicals in large amounts, really, by buying less products, buying fewer products. Why do we need a kitchen cleaner that's a surface cleaner, a carpet cleaner, oven cleaner, window cleaner? We have so many cleaners. That alone is something we could be thinking about in terms of just buying fewer products or even making our own, which I have do-it-yourself, recipes. The swap portion is, look, you don't want to change out your lipstick and stop using lipstick or stop anything, then just try to find a safer version. And here's how to do it. The third A, so is first assess, second is avoid. Third A is add. And really, to your point about, humans need things in their lives. You talk about spirituality. There's so much we need in our lives, nature, but we also need nutrition. We need nutrition that's been really limited over the last several hundred years in terms of human existence. We need sweating. We need stress reduction. We need components in food that actually upregulate detoxifying pathways in our liver. We need lymphatic system movement and drainage. So there's so much we can add in, not just take away, that really helps the human body thrive. And then the fourth A is allow. And that goes to this point where, everyone has a different journey and everyone's moving along this path. And some people have no clue, and that's okay. And some people are really into this and are like biohackers. Whatever part of that journey you're on, allow is listen, do it at your own pace. Learn about these things sequentially in a way that works for you, and maybe go with the highest yield exposures first, because we're not going to argue about birthday cake or travel or things you can't always control, but we can think about the food we consume on a regular basis. We can think about our drinking water and how to filter it in our home where we have so much control. And so that allow really helps psychologically for a lot of people to really do the lift of some of the other changes.
It's interesting where there's blind spots for people as well. I'll buy organic food, but put on Italian cologne. I do all these things right, but I need to spray the thing for pet odor in my house. I've got the Glade plug-in. I didn't realize that was a problem. And so all these areas that live under the radar because we're creatures of habit, I'm sure you have dug up a lot of those for your patients over the years. It's crazy how some of them are aha moments, right? Where it's like, oh, there's a chemical in that thing. Why else would it smell like that? And we just don't get it. So where are some of these things kind of hiding in plain sight that our listeners would be like, oh my God, it's me?
Yeah. And I think in the bigger perspective on this book and the work I do is really giving people perspective, right? It's not like you're going to become a toxicologist overnight, need to know every single chemical, right? The idea is two things. You really want to be thinking of your body as a sponge. Like we are absorbing a lot of what we created. And guess what? You're going to walk through life with hopefully a different perspective on what you're seeing, smelling. You're going to be more aware, and awareness is worth everything, right? So to your point, I've been on this journey 15 years, my friend. 15 years. And I just got to changing the trash bags out without any fragrance connected to the plastic. They're infused with all these chemicals because they're trying to offset the stink of trash. But you can find and locate some of those bags without that. And that was a swap that felt good. And here I am 15 years into this process, But even to the plugins that I used to have a whole drawer. I talk about my journey in the book because people are going to relate to it. One day when I was learning about phthalates and read all these medical studies, this is about 10 years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, I have an entire drawer of Ocean Breeze that you plug in and Strawberry Fields and pumpkin spice and things for the holidays. And I could not, at that moment, I had never connected the chemicals that I'm actively putting into my wall, which end up in my home and end up in our bodies, never connected with the science until that moment. And so that's what we're really talking about here is really the awareness to make those changes and then having the resources, vetted resources, scientifically backed information to me is key. And it's really hopefully what people will see from this book and hopefully from our conversation.
It's funny. I just cruised by one of these biohacking conferences, and this big, like, muscular guy who's obviously on steroids, right, was walking around talking about, health. He was wearing this overwhelming amount of cologne. And I could just see chemically sensitive people start to just flinch as this guy was walking down the aisle, right? Like, people are just doing a conference, buzz, 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 talking. And it's almost like he was parting the Red Sea, where people are like, oh, and some people don't smell it, and other people will have a migraine for a week. So as a rheumatologist, and this is something I want to dig in with you, because rheumatology, traditional rheumatology, not cool doctors like you, but traditional rheumatology hasn't really looked at this crap, right? Like, they are like, okay, what do you got? Oh, it's this, it's that. Maybe it's not this. And so they're looking for a slew of diagnosable illnesses. They have a really, interesting corner of medicine, but this ocean of toxins and lifestyle and all this stuff that's now kind of washed up on your beach really is, I think, challenging at the very least for the area of rheumatology, because now it's like, oh my God, this is so much bigger than what we knew as our practice.
And absolutely correct. And look, here is the problem. I never throw my colleagues under the bus. I throw the system under the bus because the system is really where we need to make changes. And, they're still not, I say they, meaning medical schools across this country, do not actually embrace environmental health or nutrition as a core component of medical training and even in other healthcare fields. So the idea that we're not getting that even now, and I know this because I've offered up free curriculum, 40 hours, and schools don't want it. Okay. So you're seeing doctors who are actually genuinely interested in this area, not just rheumatologists, and they're signing up for physician training programs outside, maybe even years after they've graduated and have done residencies and been practicing, because they've seen that there are effects from foods we eat that help people, or avoiding something helps people, things that have nothing to do with pharmacology, pharmacological therapies, drugs. So I think what we're starting to see is a combination of people getting sick, much more than we've seen in the past at younger ages. We're seeing doctors who are looking for other tools to add to this wonderful repertoire that we do have. I'm a physician that uses all the medications. I wear a Western rheumatology hat as well as an integrative, because all of these I look at as tools to help heal, to help manage very complicated illnesses. So medications are great, but they may not likely be used reflexively. Maybe we'll try, as I say in the book, nutrition and diet and removing chemicals that we know actually instigate immune system effects, right? I call them immune disrupting chemicals in the book, but IDCs can be removed and we can see how they feel, how they look, as long as it's not life threatening. So there's so much in the way of pulling people in who are interested, and that over time, this interest has spread. Rheumatologists are detectives. You ask any specialty in medicine, and they will tell you that the number one field of detective work is really within rheumatologists, because we see such a variety of symptoms in part of all of the syndromes we see and all the diseases we see. That being said, we should be more empowered as rheumatologists to be interested in this area, because if anything, it'll make us look like superstars when we actually know how to help people without adding more medications that also add side effect risk. So I feel that this is going to happen. It's happened over the last 5 to 10 years. And now I think it's just expanding. Again, my concern is always with the messengers and the science. And we don't want to get off track when it comes to evidence-based information, because we have so much that's really peer-reviewed journals about nutrition as well as environmental health that we can add in as physicians of all kinds.
You're kind of sitting at this interesting junction between allopathy and naturopathy in a lot of ways, right? Or in allopathy, it's like, okay, well, we understand the mechanism. Let's go downstream and give this medication to bring down the inflammation here because of this. And naturopathy being, where's the obstruction to cure? Well, in this one, it is bisphenol. In this, it is, some VOC, and removing the issues that would then create the warble, right? The problem in the body that then turns into the reaction. And I think it's an interesting time in medicine for that, right? Is like these systems are coming together and we're able to, if we're not stuck in our dogma, pick from all of the different categories of what works and do what's best for our patients, which is what I hear you say you're doing in your practice.
Yeah. And again, I'm also a product of Western, I'm a product of integrative. And then I find out, so all of these things shape the subjective work of medicine, right? The algorithm doesn't always work in terms of the formal algorithm, but the subjective also doesn't always work because we're, as practitioners, no matter who you are, you're subject to your own experience, right? Mm-hmm. If you had, a certain disease yourself, you're going to look at the world as everyone sort of having that disease as well. You're going to be more inclined to be tuned to it or even treat to it, even if it may not be the case. So I think we have to be very careful in terms of over testing people. I think we have to, and costing a lot of money. I think we have to be very conscious of understanding the science behind any of the fields that we incorporate and not just do it blindly. I just think there has to be some value to science and balance. That being said, there's an amazing amount of healing practices, ancient practices, modern day practices that are remarkable. Traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, massage therapy, lymphatic massage, cognitive mental health, cognitive behavioral therapy. We just have so many aspects of the human body's complexities that we can dive into, that I just feel like it should be something we all embrace instead of shun and be fearful of. And that's a lot of what Western medicine does do that. It intentionally creates a kind of a hierarchy of knowledge and a little bit of ego that we have to work against. And I was that person too, until I really was questioning other tools. So it's a journey. I hope people jump on it and do things at their own pace. But I'm very hopeful because of all the medical programs that are developed now to learn all this information. I'm very hopeful that we're moving in the right direction. Andrew Weil said we shouldn't have this world where we have to sign up for integrative medicine training. It should all be integrative medicine. I mean, that really should be the standard of care if you think about it. And I fully agree.
It's an interesting time as we're recording this, right? Alluding to the hubris of a system that assumes it's right. And, the guillotines came out recently. Right. And now there's a lot of baby being thrown out with bathwater, and there's just a lot of reaction to the medical establishment, some of it justified and some of it probably not justified. Right. There's been a lot of really good innovation that's getting swept out the door. And so we live in an interesting time. And I think somewhere in between all of this, we'll have a nice form of medicine. But the underlying thesis here, screw who's right, is people are sick. And what I'm hearing here that I think just needs to be underlined, highlighted, and double clicked on is rule number one is don't poison yourself, right? As much as you think you could detoxify, don't toxify to begin with and then detoxify. So how do we phase this? Like there's the lifestyle component and then there's the self-care component. And then Lord knows you might be doing EDTA or something crazy because you're really toxic. But downstream, there's all sorts of remedial stuff. So how do you look at this as a hierarchy of how we live?
Well, believe it or not, I created a 21-day plan in order to address this exact issue. Because here's the thing, we can all go nuts. And I was nuts in the beginning when I first learned this material 15 years ago and was looking around my kitchen at my cat going, are you serious? There's no regulation on chemicals there. How did I not know this in medication? I mean, in medical school, I was so dumbfounded that I had to research the medical journal articles and go after the first authors on all these journal authors on BPA, on that, because I didn't even understand how this could be real and not make it into my training. But I will say to you that once you're on the ledge and you're stressed out, you're doing the exact opposite of the purpose of this book and this work, because stress is also a toxic component in our lives. And so you don't want to add that stress while you're working on getting rid of canned foods or BPA or phthalates in cologne, right? You can do this in a process that makes sense. So the 21-day plan was laid out like the 4 A's. The first week is about assessing. The second week is about avoiding or swapping and where are the resources and here's an easy way to do it. And then the third week, I should say, of the 21-day plan was add. That's all the stuff that helps our bodies thrive. When you have a handheld plan, when it makes sense, when it's not over the top, when it's not expensive, when it's accessible, all of these things are not just for the rich or for people who have plenty of time on your hand. I speak to schools and high schools and colleges, doctors in every socioeconomic background and communities. We have to really say that this work of getting rid of synthetic chemicals that are not healthy for the human body, as an example, is a universal message. It's a nonpartisan issue that everyone who bleeds red should be healthy as much as we can do that in modern day times. And that's actually why you said this time is very interesting. We have so much attention on food chemicals for sure, and less on some of these other things as much, like drinking water, which I'm trying to bring attention to, and other things. But here's the thing. No matter if they took, and I'll be honest about this, when they take out one chemical at a time and it's fought over and then it's finally removed, and then it takes 2 years to actually require it being removed from products. So there's always a window of time before a regulation is put into place and it's actionable in terms of punishment if you don't do it. It is so unbelievably limited in terms of our human lifespan. In terms of the amount of chemicals, which is over 95,000 estimated in our everyday lives and all of our products, it's by removing them one by one from a regulatory standpoint, it is just far too slow, in my opinion, for human health to do as well as it could. And this is why I'm trying to urge people to think about doing it yourself. Don't wait to be saved. Don't wait for the next administration. I've been doing this work for 15 years, and it's been through 3 or 4 administrations. Both policies have changed, come and gone, fighting has ensued, whatever. The point is, I've never waited to have those regulations fully implemented or to wait till they happen, because they're just too few and far between. I support all of them. I want us to regulate food chemicals. We have so many, over 13,000 that have been grandfathered in under generally recognized as safe, which has no required testing essentially for safety, toxicity, especially in vulnerable populations. So we really want to do this, but I also say at the same time, let's do it ourselves, because we can do so much more and be more effective when we actually make our own choices for our own body and have agency.
Oh, that's tough. I got to think for myself. That's really the crux of it, right? Is, I've handed my health over to the doctor. I've handed my protection over to the cops. I've handed off all my agency, and I expected the fox to guard the hen house. And so these regulatory bodies, as well-intentioned as they may be, we can't. And so we have to wake up to this, and we have to now be aware of this in a way that, to your point, doesn't raise our secretory IgA, that doesn't elevate our cortisol and make us worse off. So the operating system, and I think this is where, and this is my opinion, and we could push back or whatever, is I think that we have this campaign-based healthcare where it's like, okay, well, I'm toxic. Now I'm going to detox, and then I'm going to go back to being me, versus shifting my operating system to live a non-toxic lifestyle so that I'm not constantly on this yo-yo. And I feel, and listen, I used to have practices in LA, and people would come in and talk about detox after having a bender weekend. I'm like, that's not what detox is. Like, you're retoxing and detoxing. Like, I'm bored. And so the lifestyle of living a non-toxic way, I'd love for you to expound on that, because at the end of the day, to me, that's the gold standard, right? It's how we live so that we don't need all the stuff.
Yeah. And I'm 52, and I'm telling you, it's taken me a lot of years to think about the stuff. And I think that there's part of this. Look, I have teenagers that love cologne and they love their products. And certainly we work through all the rating systems and try to get cleaner versions. But I think at every point of your life, you have different value systems at that time, right? When you're a new mom, there's certain things that you value more than others. When you're a grandparent, when you're working, not working. I mean, I think that, to your point, this is not about a diet. I've never, ever talked to people and said, I'm going to create a 21-day plan that's a diet, it's a cleanse. When you're done to 21 days, you're in great shape, go out and have a good time. This is exactly what you said. It's about how to incorporate these things in a meaningful way, where you have to understand what the problems are so that you can better really realize and wrap your head around the changes. Because if you just make the changes and you don't have the why and you're just doing the what, it doesn't stick. It does not stick. You have to know the why so that it hits you right here in your heart that you can do the what. Because really, that's the way things stick as a lifestyle as opposed to a one-off diet. And there's no perfection, as I said. We go away on trips. When you travel and I travel, when we go running around doing what we do, maybe for work, you're experiencing the airports and all the lack of food that you might want to choose, or maybe the clean water, the filters are carbon block. We're at home, they're reverse osmosis, or blah, blah, blah. Your plastic water bottles. We're going to go through those with very little control in some ways, although I give a lot of, hopefully, good advice on that. The idea is that there's no perfection. What you want to do is try to control as best you can your home, your work environment, if it's local. You want to make better choices. And over time, these things layer in where you're really gamifying it, where you're in control. You're not a victim of the environment that we all created. You're really in charge. And that to me means everything moving forward, not just a quick fix diet, like you said.
I know a lot of people listening to this are somewhere in that no man's land of going, yes, I agree. But the community I live in, the people I'm around, they're going to call me a weirdo. I'm going to be the weird person. I'm going to the health nut, all these kind of labels that come with people who give a shit in the last 20, 30 years. How do you coach people who are in the world, who still need to fit in at the parent thing, to live this way and not necessarily wear it on their forehead and advertise it in a way that a lot, I don't care. I'm the weirdo, right? A lot of people are worried about being that person.
I've always said in life, I said this to my kids, find your people. Go where the love is. I'll give you an example. When I was working with Environmental Working Group 15 years ago, I reached out to them because I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, what are you talking about these chemicals? And what do you mean this is in this? And what do you mean it causes that? And I reached out to them because there was nothing in the medical world that I had as a resource. So I reached out to them and said, listen, I want to teach my community. I'm going to write up a PowerPoint. Could you just send me some articles that, do you know that they called me and they said, you know what? Not only are you the first doctor to reach out to us, but we'll help you create a program and maybe you'll be able to do this in hospitals around the country or whatever. So I said, all right. So for a year and a half, they were teaching me about how these chemicals work in terms of their abilities to change hormones and mimic hormones and affect the immune system, all that. I went into about 25, I think it was maybe 30 hospital systems doing grand rounds presentations for NICUs and pediatricians, pediatrics departments, internal medicine, geriatric. Not any of them, not one of them came up to me afterwards and said, you know what? I saw that resource for changing out plastic chemicals that are toxic in the NICU or in the ICU or this, that, and the other, and I'd like to get involved and change out our equipment. Not one. And it wasn't until my babysitter said to me, hey, you work with chemicals? I wonder if my shampoo is killing me, as she's walking out the door. And I thought to myself, that's the people who want to hear about this. Young people are interested. Maybe I'll try to do some pilot projects in high schools. Let's see what they like. Go where the love is. The point is, I found the community that wanted to hear what I was at least learning and trying to share. Go with the love of the people around you that are not going to make you crazy, right? But people who support at least your philosophies. You don't have to be eye to eye on all of the minutia and all of the IVs or drips or this pill or that, but you can at least have an appreciation and share that with a community that you feel comfortable with. And I have never really gone back to those communities directly because it's not where the love is for me. My area has shifted, but now I'm teaching programs for those doctors who do want that information. And I think it's changed everything for at least my spirit in terms of how to get this information across.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. We have run into many versions of humans growing up, and look, you do well, you're in affluent communities do things the way they do them, and you're on the golf course. And I'm like, why are the dogs blue? Oh my God, that's 2,4-D. And nobody cares and nobody's listening. And so the echo chamber of people who are just fine stay that way because no one wants to stand out. Everyone's trying to fit in. But there's a big problem with that. And I'd love to just spend a moment on this. We're talking about endocrine disruption. We're talking about the backup and the challenges that come with phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 liver detoxification. We're talking about all of the neuroendocrine challenges that come with toxicity Those are all just big, funny words. So let's translate those into what? PMS, migraines, weight gain. So you start talking about all the shit that people are having trouble with out there and taking medicine or going on crash diets and doing this and doing that because they think their problem is a lack of six-pack abs videos or whatever it is. You realize that the problem is in everyone's face. They just don't realize it. So what are this nexus? And again, don't go one-to-one because it's functional medicine and who knows how bodies break. But what, like the cloud of symptoms and problems that you would see in everyday humans from toxic overload that they may or may not recognize as coming downstream from what we're talking about?
Great question. So I'll start off with the big ones that a lot of people have heard of. So we know that puberty has gone to younger ages, right? So for a couple hundred years ago, we used to have, young people men and boys and girls would both go into puberty or menarche for girls and start their first periods at age 16, 17. Now it's as early as 7, 8, 9 years of age. The association is really between how environmental chemicals that act as low-level estrogens can do that, can shift, can also affect blocking of testosterone. So we now have a lot of data, really robust from around the world, showing that everyday chemicals, particularly even personal care products, young people, teenagers, they use the most personal care products in a 24-hour period than any other demographic. So we know that there's a connection between the number of chemicals that work like this and having a shift over 2 generations of puberty starting early. We know that the number of women having breast cancer, being diagnosed with breast cancer, has shot up. It's not because we're so good at detecting, like I would say for autoimmune diseases. It's not like we're so great at detecting this in 15-minute appointments necessarily that we're set up for now. It's just that we have so much more of it. And breast cancer is generally considered 90% environment, 10% genetic, 90% environment. Breast tissue loves many of these chemicals. They're lipophilic. They love fat. This is a very strong connection for many of the chemicals that we use in everyday products. And there's wonderful studies I put in this book so people can understand that connection. When it comes to immune disorders, such as rheumatologic conditions, which is a big focus in the book because I'm a rheumatologist, we have between 7 and 14% of the US population has an autoimmune disease of one kind or another. And that number is expected to increase. 1% of the world's population has rheumatoid arthritis. It's the most common inflammatory joint condition worldwide. And the fact that these chemicals can also have immune stimulating effects, not just at the cellular level, things like molecular mimicry, things like epigenetic changes, but we also have direct effects on the gut microbiome, just from literally hitting the gut and killing off the good microbes, which affects the immune system, which the gut is the largest immune system in the body. So we know that all of these day-to-day choices can contribute to increased risk. We're seeing higher numbers in a lot of these conditions that are both endocrine and immune system derived, but we can also pull that back. We can actually lower inflammation. We can actually reduce our risk for hormone-sensitive cancers like breast and testicular and prostate. And we can also really manage a lot of these hormonal changes that we're seeing, even weight gain, as you said. Why are we not thinking about reducing these chemicals as a means of reducing weight, or even not just reducing weight, but maintaining our weight? Because so many of these chemicals have contributions to increasing fat size, to changing stem cells into developing into adipocytes, to blocking adiponectin, which is a anti-inflammatory component. So when you block that net, you get inflammation, especially with the fat cells. So we have a lot of data on these chemicals, and so much of it is simple choices. It's just a matter of knowing that's one area to focus in for so many of these health conditions.
I know you focused a bit on the what we absolutely know category. I'd like to move a little bit into a squishier category that I think is important for me, which is mitochondrial dysfunction, the capacity of our mitochondria to produce energy, and what happens with diminished energy output. So mitochondrial dysfunction, okay, we'll talk about that. Less energy, okay, that sounds not great. But if energy is the currency of life, and we need that to move our bodies, we need that for motivation, we need that for our happiness, we need that for enthusiasm, our immunity, and all of it, you're taking cash out of my life's pocket by bringing down my mitochondria. I want to spend a second talking about the deep implications of having less energy available in your life on a day-to-day basis, and what that looks like 30 years later, right? Like, I just think that's very expensive.
Again, you are touching on something that at the cellular level, we have mechanisms for how many of these chemicals, not all of them, they have to be studied by third-party academic centers, right? So this is a hard lift. But for the thousands that we do have, we know that not just metabolism is affected by hormones, which is the endocrine system, but the immune system affects metabolism. So they're all kind of integral. It just depends on the framing of the story. But there's no question that metabolic changes happen with exposures. BPA is one of the most commonly studied endocrine disrupting chemicals. We've heard of that in canned foods. It lines all canned foods, but it's in a lot of other things like on receipts, and it's in a lot of plastics that we utilize, food storage, those kind of things. BPA is probably the most well studied as well in terms of the immune system. It also is well studied when it comes to metabolic changes. And guess what? You can hit all of these components of health changes by just changing over canned foods to less canned foods, fresh or frozen, or grow your own. And there's so many ways to do that. But guess what? That's the largest exposure of BPA. And yet here you can hit off 3 systems or 3 mechanisms in one shot just by making a simple change. And those are the kind of things that don't cost a lot of money. Believe it. It's just a matter of being aware of how to make those swaps, which subsequently will affect how you feel. So energy is key. I have a patient in this book named Massimo, and he comes in and he's fatigued, and that's his biggest issue. And he's not an old guy. This is not someone you could stereotypically say, oh, you had a full life and you've been busy and maybe you need to rest more. You're older. No, this is a young guy. He's overweight. He's exposed to PFAS chemicals because of his job as a pizza maker. He's where that is and how that's teased out is certainly in the book. But I check his hormones and his vitamin D level, and I'm checking all these other components of fatigue that we should all be looking at and ruling them out one by one, and then seeing that we have this really big area that we could just work on through energy and lifestyle and biking to work and playing with his kids and reducing his stress and putting things in perspective. And wouldn't you know it, he did much better. This is a real patient. So I think to your point that when you fix your body cellularly, you're also fixing the spirit, one or the other. Either way, you're going to have a positive reinforcement for living and evolution and moving forward. And I think that's what we're messing with. We're messing with our natural propensity to want to thrive. And that's either from the emotional and from the physical.
Yeah, I appreciate that. This has been the part about the health and wellness industry that just kills me, right? Is on one side, you're choking and suffocating your cellular machinery with the plugins and the toxins and all this. And on the other side, you're spending triple the money on acai because you think you have to superfood your body because your lack of energy is coming from lack of really expensive exotic berries. Whereas if you were to remove those choke points and let your body do what it does without the toxins, oh my God, I feel better.
Oh yeah. And I named my whole platform on social media is called The Smart Human. And it was always derived from evolution and anthropology and all my love of those courses back in college and beyond. And you're tying into the fact that like our bodies were actually meant to thrive with very natural environment. We can't always get it. We live in a modern day world. Some people work 5 jobs. You might have 3 kids. You might have to do a million things with elderly, and our lives are crazy. But the goal should always, the eye on the prize is to how do we make things cleaner? How do we move back in time to things like cleaning products our grandparents used or with fewer ingredients in products we buy? How do we get more sleep? Because sleep is so important to the brain, to the lymphatic system, lets our brain rest so we can think and have improved cognition. But it also actually clears out chemicals while we sleep. And this is such an evolutionary bonus that we've discovered. So, I feel like I can't even remember the question because my brain is just tied up in knots here. But what was the question again?
The question was how silly, it's not even a question,
Yeah.
it's a statement. How silly is this health and wellness industry
Yeah.
convincing us that it's a lack of acai versus the
Right.
toxins that we're not looking at? That are
Right.
there's so much under the rug, it's lumpy.
Yeah.
and we're wondering why we're tripping, right? Like it doesn't make sense when you look at it from the outside in, yet we're all going and getting ice baths and all these weird biohacking advice, thinking that has to be the answer. And so I love the simplicity of saying, well, don't poison yourself first and then go the other way around.
Well, we all love a quick fix. I mean, I'm looking at my teenagers and thinking this is an immature process and a way of living. And yet here I'm an adult and I'm also thinking about how to have a quick fix to not be old and have wrinkles on podcasts and look thinner and cuter, whatever. We all are products of being in a modern day life where our expectations have been all sorts of flipped around. And social media, of course, doesn't help. But you're right. There's no magic pill. There's no quick fix. When I see products that are like one microbe or one berry, like you said, or this is going to change or that's going to change, if it feels too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. And in fact, there's nothing about the human existence that's simple, and certainly not one pill or one nutrient is going to solve all ills. I say look at things holistically. Take a deep breath, step back, and really look at the big picture and work your way in. Because when you take the big picture, it gives you perspective. It tells you how much to stress or not to stress. You're really looking at it from a bird's eye view. And I find that's been most effective for patients and for myself, making those changes. It's not going to be one thing. It's going to be multitudes of things that you're incorporating into your choices on a day-to-day basis.
So we're running out of time. I want to talk about leverage. When you look at the environment, it's obviously, okay, so you have your water, you have your air, you have your food, you have your skin. And these are all these vectors through which the crap can get in, but through which we can also change our inputs and let less crap in, right? So how should our listeners think about this?
So one of the routes of entry I wanted to mention is feminine care products too. And if you have a young daughter, if you're a female yourself, or you love a woman, it might be also useful to think of that as another very big entry point into the body, and especially by volume in terms of periods throughout a lifetime. What would I say? I would say you want to go with the low-hanging fruit. Okay. I love that expression because to me, it's really about what are the high yield changes with the least amount of effort and cost? Okay. Who doesn't want to hear that? Right. I think about number one, don't buy stuff that you don't need. Maybe think things through in terms of just the sheer number of products you bring in. You don't have to be a toxicologist to know that they're loaded with proprietary blends of chemicals they don't reveal. Phthalates are fragrances that there's thousands of potential chemicals in any of the words that say fragrance on a product. I think if you buy less, you're immediately going to lower your exposures. I also think about habit. Every morning I have tea. I love my tea. My husband likes coffee, but we're doing it every day. So let's start with something we do every day and just kind of clean it up. So I have filtered water because I have a reverse osmosis that costs $275 in my house, $150 for the plumber. That was a great lift. And that's part of all of our water, so drinking and cooking. Then I use ceramic instead of any kind of paper cups that have plastic liners. If you go to like a Starbucks or wherever, Dunkin', and you choose to do that, then just bring a big stainless steel insulated bottle like I have here behind me. I mean, the idea is that you can just layer in one or two changes at low cost that will really influence the exposures. My tea is loose leaf, so I don't have to get all of those tea bag microplastics, which we now know have some great science behind what's released, especially at high temperatures. My creamer is organic creamer because I don't want some of those added antibiotics that are used in traditional farming practices. My sugar, if I use sugar, is going to be organic cane sugar. So I'm trying to clean up pieces of the picture of my morning habit. It took a long time to do this, but it's something that we can all think about. Even drinking water by volume, food by volume, big places to start. Frozen organic foods are so accessible now. They're cleaner by virtue of pesticides and fertilizer chemicals. And frozen organics, every big box store has, very lucrative, are super cheap and have all the nutrient value because they're flash frozen. So that alone just democratized food safety, in my opinion, just by having access to frozen USDA organic foods. So I think about all of this in terms of cost and effort. So I think volume first, and then you worry less about the things that are less common in your life, and you'll get to those later.
One of the areas of leverage that I thought was important was also time in my life, your life, right? So And 24 hours, I spend 8 of them in that place up there called my bedroom. So that is a long time if I'm huffing paint. That's a long time if my pillow is toxic. So looking at the places you spend the most time, look at your desk, in your car, wherever that is, and say, okay, what's toxic here? And so it's a little bit of Sherlock, but it's actually kind of fun taking your unaware eye and making awareness come back to the room. So what the heck is going on here? I spend 30% of my day in this room. Maybe it's something in this room that makes me not feel good. Right. And just going along that trajectory, I found it becomes fun for people after a while.
Yeah, you can gamify this. I mean, the 21-day plan is just what you just said. It's basically walking you through things you might not have thought of. Maybe you were doing really well, and then you're like, oh my gosh. I remember a year after swapping out my nonstick pans, I remembered cooking my eggs in my nonstick pans, all happy with myself, and realizing there were plastic spatulas and stuff. And I thought, boy, it took me a year to really think that there's other exposures within all I'm saying is it's almost like practice. It's a muscle. It's that you start to practice, you start to look through life through certain glasses, and it really trains you to be conscientious of these exposures. You don't have to go crazy, but you have a plan. Like, that's my to-do list. I'm going to go get bamboo and I'm going to go get stainless steel utensils. Maybe that's a win for the month. But either way, you're doing this in a way where you're empowered, not the victim, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, really appreciate that. So the book is called Detoxify, Dr. Bailey Cohen. If you have it for our video audience, flash it here.
Oh, sure.
Boom, beautiful. Really, I think essential reading for anyone who lives in the modern world. If you live up in the sticks and you're getting this through some sort of satellite internet and outside is pristine, then lucky you. But the rest of us have exposures landing on our door every day, multiple times a day if you're shopping on Amazon and those boxes keep showing up. And so I think it's essential reading. Go out, read it, understand it, implement it. 21 days later, you're going to be better. And I've seen this time and time again is folks who take this to heart and just start doing the next logical step, they start to see the improvement in their lives. And that improvement comes in the form of less pain, more energy, less symptoms. It's just, you get a bit of your life back. You get a little more air in the tank, and then you have more to work with. And I find that it's a really good unlock for people whose lives are a bit stuck.
Wonderful. Well said. I mean, and that's the goal. It's not always perfection, as I said, but it's to feel better overall. And it's to prevent illnesses that you may not realize are down the path. So, this is a part where we can all kind of participate in our own health. And it's proven fruitful so far with patients. So I really hope people will embrace this because I think it's useful and I'm happy to do it.
Keep going. Keep going. I know sometimes it can be tough, especially when you're going up against an establishment that's busy doing what they're doing. So my hat's off to you, and I appreciate what you've done and what you will continue to do for us. So thank you, Dr. Bailey Cohen.
Thank you so much for having me, and follow on The Smart Human if you're interested, TikTok, Twitter, podcasts, all that, so people can learn more about environmental health and simple fixes. So the website, thesmarthuman.com as well. Thank you.
We'll put everything in the show notes as well. Thank you.